Circle graphs are next on our agenda here. So our circle graph, a lot of times we just call these pie charts. It's a visual way to show how a whole is divided into parts. So the entire circle represents 100% of the data, and each slice or sector represents a proportion or percentage of the total. So a lot of times, we use these for budgeting and things like that. But some things that we'll have to pick up on is so we'll have each slice will represent a category. So it's share of the total. I think a lot of times, like I said, we'll see that probably as a percentage. What percent of the pie do you get, if you will? What's nice about this is larger slices represent larger proportions, a larger chunk, if you will. Smaller slices would represent littler slivers of the pie. So a lot of times we have to use angles or percentages. So we have to kind of do a percent of the 360 degrees, if you will, to determine the slices. But these slices are going to be labeled with percentages, fractions or numbers, but I think percentages are most common. This works really well if you're limited between like 3 and 7 groups. So if you don't have a ton of groups, you're pretty good here. But you probably don't want more than you want a little bit of groups too, because otherwise you're not going to be able to see much because of the comparisons there. So again, a circle graph is especially used when you want to display budget breakdowns, survey results, market share, population composition. So those are some big ones. So, budget we kind of pick up on survey, market, like stock market. Population composition is a little bit more, what are they talking about with the composition of the population? Because there's different ways to break up a population. So that one would have to be explained in a little bit more detail, what they mean by the population composition. So any situation where you need to see how each part compares to the whole is a great idea. So for us, how do we determine the degrees of each slice in the circle? I think that's going to be what our homework is. So take notes, pause the video as you need to. So a full circle contains 360 degrees. Each category in your data gets a portion of those 360 degrees based on its relative share. Okay. So how do I determine the degrees for the slice? It's going to be the category to frequency divided by the total frequency. Okay. And also that's going to give us a percentage, and that percentage is going to be multiplied by this 360. So remember, part over whole is that percentage language. So if I know the part over the whole, which will become a percent, but this percent will be in the form of a decimal, we'd be multiplying that decimal number, if you will, by this 360. So notice how we will actually drop the degrees symbol and just multiply by 360. So question 11. So may need a calculator here. So let me see if I pull up a calculator. So get my calculator up here. Let me see if we get this little line to slide over a little bit. All right. I think we can still see things. So question 11, consider the chart to the right. Well, I dropped it down here at the bottom. So this is the pie chart that they're talking about. What is the greatest single expense category to the nearest degree? What's the central angle of each category's sector? So what's the greatest single expense category to the nearest degree? What's the central angle of that category? So in our problem here, let me see if we got more things here. Well, I think I'm just doing part of this one. I don't think I've answered all of it. I think I just did the degree part. But the greatest single expense category, based on what we're seeing here, is this is federal spending from 2011 to 2020. I'm seeing the light green Medicare and Medicaid is takes the biggest chunk of federal spending, around 23%. So that would be the biggest category. Now, from here, they're asking us to determine the number of degrees of each sector. So the first one, so actually I take that back. We got to choose Medicaid, Medicare. We don't, this is just a multiple choice question. Sorry. So Medicare is the biggest expense category. I don't see anything bigger than 23%. So multiple choice, D. And then if I want to determine the number of degrees, the part over whole is going to be that percent. So it's really just going to be this 23% times this 360 is really all we got to do. Because you remember part over whole, if I come back down here a little bit, remember percent means per 100. So remember, if I gave you 25% means 25 out of 100. So keep that in mind. So notice how 25% would be 25 out of every 100 students. So remember, to change 8% to a decimal, we just got to drop the decimal sign. I'm sorry, drop the percent sign and move the decimal two places to the left. So notice that if I want to change 23% to a decimal, just drop the percent sign and move the decimal two places to the left. And that's where I get that 0.23 at. Now, once I have that, all I got to do now is just multiply 0.23 times 360, and that'll give us the angle for that sector. So 0.23 times is 360 gives me then this 82.8. And they do want us to round to the nearest degree. So would that be 82 or 83? So they want us to round to the ones place. So that 8 would say round on up to 83. So this would actually be in this little box here. I'm just going to put it out to the side here, would be 83, would be in that box. So 83 degrees would be about what this angle is about 83 degrees. And that's not bad because it almost looks like it's a right angle, because a right angle makes an L shape, and that's just short, just a little short of an L. So 83 degrees sounds reasonable for that question. Okay, so I think that concludes our section. So again, I'll pause my video here, and you can kind of take some notes on percents. And then I'll come back up here, and again, I'll pause my video a little bit here, and you can kind of study this question. And let me drop down a little bit. You can kind of study this question again based on what I've done there. So that should conclude then visual displays in 12.1.